Next one which I want to talk about is the night bug. The next one which I want to talk about is the night bug. Hello, hi, my name is Ollie Bliss and this is my channel Book Draw. For those who don't know, I enjoy looking at queer fiction and occasionally I'll create images out of it. Today is the second part of my wrap up where I'm looking at my month of May. There is a costume change because it is actually a different day. It's not because I am trying to allude that I have done separate days of filming. I have actually done separate days of filming and I had put some ice cream on my other top and I didn't feel like I could really show that off to the world of the internet. The first book which I read in the month of May, or audio listened to, was The Miseducation of Cameron Post, which is by Emily M. Danforth. And I wanted to get on top of listening to this one and learning about this one because I'm aware that it's coming out as a movie later on in the year. And this is a story which is based in the 90s about a girl who basically forms a relationship with another girl. They're in a kind of religious area in general, and her aunt in particular is quite religious. Basically, Cameron Post goes to conversion therapy with a camp, and I believe that this story is based on the events of Zach Stark controversy, where he spoke out through his blog from a place called Refuge, which had been set up by Love in Action. So it's kind of based on real life events, but this is a fictional story. I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed the voice of the character. I thought her kind of coming of age moments that she was going through were really interesting, but also I liked the strength of the character. It did remind me of the strength of the character in Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. It's quite similar in a lot of sense, that she is rebelling and standing out against what other people are telling her in terms of you are wrong, this is wrong, you need help, you need to find God and you need to be sorted out and you need to be basically straight. It goes into quite a dark place and it really highlights the emotional strain that it can put on young people in terms of them being quite vulnerable, being unsure and inquiring about their sexuality, and trusting adults' supervision and support to guide them, and that having really damaging consequences, really damaging in terms of what the story goes into. But what I also enjoyed was that there is a relationship and a tension between the organisers. It's good, it's intense, it's quite dark, and it's a ride, and you should pick up the book and read it to find out. The next one is probably a much more challenging read, which I gave to myself, which is The Accusations by Bandi. Bandi is a pseudonym for the writer, because they are still actively living in North Korea. They've not defected, and these are a series of short stories which have been basically smuggled out of the country. This is possibly the most challenging book that I've read through in a very long time, and I don't think that I would have been able to stay with it, honestly, unless I had the support of Emma from My Bookish Lifestyle and from MCS Reads, Matthew from MCS Reads, because we did a buddy read with it, and having them involved really motivated me to stay with it and stick with it. Because North Korea is something which I've been interested about. I find the entire cultural setup fascinating in terms of being a dictatorship. I have seen that footage in terms of those big outdoor events which they put on and the kind of unity that they demonstrate. And there's something which is quite like appealing and in terms of that celebration, but knowing that that is like a veneer, and this really like takes a look underneath that veneer and exposes it in a lot of quite brutal ways. The thing which I found quite challenging with this is, I think that because the writer is a professional writer living in North Korea, and it was a blurring between something which is fictional as short stories and something which is based on real life events and capturing those stories and telling those stories. And I would have preferred more interview-based narratives, which were just telling events as they happened. But this combines a lot of metaphor, a lot of visualization, and also has a level of assumption in terms of what you're expected to know about North Korea. And someone who has no understanding of North Korean culture at all, I felt it quite clunky, quite difficult to follow, and the pace was kind of all over the place. The Accusations is about a culture of fear which has been created in North Korea, and it's almost like this false sense of progression that you're going to obtain by making an accusation against someone else. So it felt a little bit like the Crucible in the fact that there's a lot of kind of finger-pointing culture, and that's just to help that individual person progress against another group, because they are more committed to North Korea and towards the goals which they have, and they're almost led to believe that is the attitude that you should adopt and should behave towards. And even if a family member is a defector or someone who is going to cause a reaction, they are bad, they are evil, and they should be called out upon. And there is this culture where you're led to embrace the idea that you should accuse others, and that's really scary. And when I was reading it, I felt like I was kind of reading narratives which are around Nazi Germany. Particularly made me recall reading Friedrich, which was about two boys, one German boy and one Jewish boy, called Hans, and it's about how the family relationships erode over time as Nazis becoming into power, leading to the death of Hans. And there were three kind of core stories in here which really resonated with me more so, and had quite a universal, striking appeal in terms of the things that they were saying. There was one which really reminded me of the play Cabaret, in terms of life is a cabaret, and it's called The Stage, and it was about how this person was playing a character where they had to be forced to laugh, be forced to cry, and they're thinking how they are themselves starving and deprived of things, and they're being forced to act out a certain way on command, and feel this sense of unity which they didn't actually hold in themselves. And then the father had this really bad relationship basically with the son who's playing this role, and it just, their relationship crumbles because of the state, and because it's hard without going into the actual book, but you could see how that tension was created, and you can see the reasons why both people were feeling in that way, and it has such a poisonous and toxic outcome that it just makes your heart bleed. And that is how it feels throughout this book, and that's probably why it's also really challenging as well, but also really, really needed and necessary, just to kind of make you go, one, wow, we have it really good in the West, but two, also to be really aware of when institutions or people in positions of power are manipulating and abusing their positions, and how if we aren't mindful and we don't fight and we don't stand out, those people in those types of positions of authority and power can manipulate on a large-scale level and lead us to a situation where we're in a dictatorship and people are impoverished and are dying and living a horrible state of existence. And so this kind of just highlights all those things that we should just be super aware of. So although this was massively challenging for me personally to read, it really stands out as something which is also really vital to be reading as well. The next one which I want to talk about is The Night Brother by Rosie Garland. I was really drawn into this by a review which was done by the Lonesome Reader, Eric, who was talking really excitedly about this book, and because this was kind of queer in the sense that it features a woman by day and a man by night, and they adopt the same body, and they have this shared experience. But also because it's a narrative based in Manchester, and it was a Victorian tale, I was like, this sounds great. This was another book which I read through audio, and it was interesting to have the two different voices and the perspectives that they had, and listening to their voices was quite nice. And what I really enjoyed about it was that it was mentioning streets which I have walked around throughout Manchester, and I could recognise and I could envision and see. I kind of wish there was a little bit more detail in terms of what it was like walking down those streets, but it did it a lot better than that pirate book, which just didn't get into it. What was that called? A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. That just didn't get into like what it was like to live back in the day, whereas this did in a lot better way, and you felt like a naughty little street urchin, and you were following this character called Gnome. But what I didn't actually enjoy about this is that like there was like a framework of like a good and bad character between this gender divide, and Edie, who's the female character, you follow her predominantly, and she's the one who has more control over Gnome, and she does some things which are quite dark to Gnome in a lot of ways, which are about possession, about control, and having power over another. And it was kind of interesting that she exploited those things in her position, which basically put Gnome out of existence for 5 years. He has no memories, no experiences, he isn't able to live through Edie, so he's kind of set back 5 years behind Edie. And so he then rebels against her, and he's quite brutish about it, and it's quite almost kind of physical led, whereas she's got this kind of more emotional and intellectual level, and it felt like there was this a construct or a discussion which is being laid out about what gender roles were or are in a kind of I don't know, traditional old school sense, in terms of encapsulating a Victorian time, those Victorian roles. It was just kind of happening, and it felt like it hadn't been fully thought through. And I think that was kind of an issue which I felt like with parts of it in general, because it touches on suffrage, but it didn't go into it enough. And I felt really like frustrated that it didn't, because there is so much history and interest there. And that was just kind of like a backdrop that's kind of happening. And although Edie's kind of quite involved, and in some ways Gnome gets more involved later on in the book, they never fully explore suffrage or the state of gender properly at that time. And I felt like that was a missed opportunity within the book. And I kind of just wanted it to go a little bit further with that. It talks about this kind of like this life half lived by not fully embracing who you are or what you're about. And I felt like, although this book was exploring that, it was only half-heartedly exploring everything that it was actually looking at, and it wasn't really going into the underbelly of it properly. So I kind of felt a little bit cold by the end of it, which is a shame, because I really, really wanted to love it. But it's like an enjoyable read. It just didn't go far enough for me personally. I think, and also because the way in which Eric talks so passionately about it, it made me want to love it more. I'm just kind of sorry if Eric, if you're watching this, that I just didn't love it as much as you, and I wanted to, basically. I wanted to be there with you. So that's probably enough for me. This has been the month of May. What have you been reading over the course of this month? What are you up to reading now? We are in the kind of Pride Zone period. I'm having a great time, by the way. Just I've read The Brightsiders now. I'm halfway through Let's Talk About Love. I have massively enjoyed the pair of them. Are you having fun with your reads? Anyway, I will see you again soon. Bye!